It wasn't the first time Malik Johnson had been looked at like that. But something about this moment, the heat shimmering off the asphalt, the scent of engine oil and magnolia in the air, the hush between them as cars roared past on Highway 17 made it stick to his skin differently. She hadn't even said thank you. Sloan Whitmore, 26, white, polished her long blonde hair tied in a tight, neat knot. A Cartier watch glittered on her wrist every time she tapped her phone, searching in vain for a signal. Her tone wasn't angry, was worse. It was indifferent. The way she hadn't looked at him as he knelt in the dust, lifting her Mercedes with his own rusted jack. The way she stood like he wasn't real, like he didn't exist. Malik had learned long ago how to make himself small, how to be helpful without being threatening. He kept his voice calm, his movements measured. He smiled, but not too much. Made himself useful, but not familiar. There was a balance to strike when you were a black man in the South, especially one standing next to a white woman's luxury car in the middle of nowhere. And still, she barely nodded. He remembered thinking, this is what it costs to be decent now. A nod, a shrug. The absence of fear mistaken for kindness. She pulled away without so much as a glance back. And that should have been it. Only it wasn't. The next morning, Malik woke to the buzzing of his old phone. Dozens of notifications he didn't understand. Did you see this? Bro, you're famous? This you? He clicked a link someone had sent. A YouTube video, barely over a minute long. The title punched him in the chest. Black man helps rich white woman. She can't even say thank you. The thumbnail was a freeze frame, him crouched near the tire, sweat darkening his back while Sloan stood beside the car, arms crossed. Eyes on her phone, it had been captured by a grainy gas station camera. He didn't even know there was one nearby. But someone had pulled the footage, cut it just right, added a title, some dramatic music. It was packaged like a morality play, and it was viral. By lunchtime, news channels were contacting him. Morning shows were calling him a local hero. His face was being shared with hashtags like #RealRespect, #InvisibleNoMore, and #GoodBlackMan. He didn't know whether to be honored or insulted. Sloan Whitmore found out about the video while sitting on a shaded patio at the Charleston Yacht Club. She had an iced green tea in hand, a Burberry trench tossed over the back of her chair. Her father was on the phone when her name first popped up on Twitter. Within hours, she was a meme. Her face, eyes narrowed, mouth pursed, had become shorthand for white entitlement. Don't be a Sloan. She didn't recognize the man in the video at first, just his rough hands, his calm, competent movements. She remembered the sound of his voice, soft, slightly tired, when he'd asked if she was okay. She had nodded. She was sure she had. She'd said thank you, hadn't she? She watched the video again. No sound, no context. Just her standing, distant. Him kneeling, kind. A script America knew by heart. Walter Whitmore didn't care about context. What he cared about were headlines. His daughter was now a liability, and liabilities had to be managed. He called her into his office that evening, a corner suite towering above Charleston, all dark walnut and brass. He gestured toward the TV, muted but playing the video on loop. This, he said, is going to cost us contracts. You understand that? Sloan sat still in her tennis whites, her face flushed with a mix of confusion and humiliation. I wasn't rude. I didn't know I was being filmed. He didn't ask for anything. Walter leaned forward. He didn't have to. In this country, perception is reality. And right now, the perception is that you're an entitled brat who treats good, working people like dirt. Sloan flinched. I want you to apologize. Publicly, we'll write a statement. You'll post it. Smile a little. Cry if you can manage it. I don't care. Just clean this up. She stared at the screen. Malik's face frozen mid-motion. There was grace in it. Quiet strength. She'd seen it up close, but she hadn't really looked. Who is he? She asked quietly. Walter's jaw tightened. No one important. Malik didn't want to be a hero. He'd done what any decent person would do, or should do. The fact that it was being broadcast as some exceptional act said more about the world than about him. He avoided the news, turned down interviews. But his name was out there now. Then came the call from Derek Matthews, owner of Palmetto Transit Solutions, a rising eco-transport company trying to clean up Charleston's reputation for smog and gridlock. Derek had seen the video too, but unlike the others, he didn't call to praise. I saw the way you handled yourself, man. That's not about the tire, that's about character. I want you to come in. Let's talk about a job. Malik hesitated. People didn't just offer things, not to men like him, not without strings. Still, he showed up, and for the first time in a long time, someone saw more than what he looked like or what he used to be. The waiting room at Palmetto Transit smelled like fresh coffee and industrial cleaner. Malik sat in the farthest chair from the front desk, his hands folded tightly in his lap. Calloused fingers twitching every few seconds like they had a mind. Of their own, he hadn't worn a suit, he didn't own one. Just a clean, ironed button-down jeans without holes, and the boots he'd worn the day he helped Sloan Whitmore. They still had a thin rim of tire dust along the soles. Derek Matthews arrived with a handshake that felt too firm to be fake, and a smile that didn't drop even after Malik introduced himself. You're exactly who I was hoping to meet, Derek said. Malik blinked. Sir, I'm not sure you're humble. Good, but I've read up. You were head of maintenance at Whitmore Construction for almost 8 years. Led a team of 15. OSHA never cited a single safety violation on your watch. Not nothing. Malik swallowed. That was a long time ago. Derek's tone softened. Yeah, I know how that ended. I know what they did to you. Malik didn't talk about it much, not with friends, not even with his daughter Ala, who knew that he used to fix buildings, but never asked why he stopped. But now, sitting in an office lined with recycled wood and floor-to-ceiling windows, he let himself remember. It had started with mold, luxury condo complex in Greenville that hadn't been sealed properly. Moisture built up behind the walls, warping the beams, compromising the structure. When Malik reported it to upper management, they'd ignored him, so he escalated. They fired him 2 weeks later, no warning, no payout, just a vague note about workplace attitude. He'd considered a lawsuit, but then came the rumors difficult to work with. Angry black man, not a team player. Enough to poison his name in an industry run by handshakes and golf outings. Derek knew. Somehow, he knew it. All. And you still helped her, Derek said quietly, pulling Malik out of the memory. She was stranded, Malik replied. Didn't feel like it mattered who she was. Derek sat back, nodding slowly. You think she would have done the same for you? Malik didn't answer. Across town, in a marble kitchen bigger than most living rooms. Sloan stared at her phone for a long time before hitting record. Hi, I'm Sloan Whitmore. I want to address the video going around. First of all, I want to say I'm sorry. Truly, her voice sounded stiff. Scripted, because it was. Walter had approved every word. She wasn't allowed to speak freely. Not when the Whitmore brand was at stake. She stopped the recording, deleted it. Started again. 4 times each version sounded worse than the last. Nothing she said felt right. Not when people had already made up their minds. She was that woman. Cold, dismissive, privileged. It didn't matter that she'd been late, stressed, anxious. That she hadn't meant to come off as cruel. Intentions didn't matter not in a world of 60-second judgments. Her father's PR team had offered to craft a better message. Maybe even stage a photo op with Malik. Give him a donation, take a picture together. Let the narrative shift. Walter had said, as if the man he wanted to use like a prop had no agency of his own. Sloane had agreed, but with a strange heaviness in her chest. Malik wasn't a prop. He was a man who got up at 5:30 every morning to pack lunch for his daughter before school. A man who stood in line at community health clinics and watched younger, less experienced white guys take promotions he'd trained them for. Now, for the first time in years, he was being offered a leadership position again. Derek made it official. That week, maintenance supervisor. Better pay, benefits, flexibility, and respect. But not everyone at Palmetto was thrilled. "You're that guy from the video, huh?" said one of the older mechanics during Malik's second day on the job. "Can't go 5 feet on my feet without seeing your face." Malik smiled tightly. "Yeah, that's me." "You must have really played that moment right." He didn't say it outright, but the implication hung in the air like humidity. That Malik had performed goodness for a camera. That his kindness was a stunt. That he was cashing in on victimhood. Malik didn't respond. He just nodded and walked away. Meanwhile, Sloane asked her assistant to find Malik's contact information. She said she wanted to apologize in person, but the truth was more complicated. She wanted to understand why he had been the one elevated when she was the one under fire. She wanted to ask if he was angry, if he hated her, if he believed everything being said about her. It was hard. Growing up told you were exceptional lonely to find out the world thought you were a villain. Her assistant found him. Palmetto Transit. She sent an email. They met at a park near the Ashley River. Public, quiet, neutral ground. Malik came wearing the same boots. Sloane came without makeup, her hair down for once. She brought a coffee. He brought nothing. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted you to hear me say it." Malik looked at her. Not cruelly, just steadily. "You didn't see me," he said. "That's what stayed with me. Not the thank you, not the cameras, just the way you looked through me." She swallowed hard. "I didn't mean I know," he said. "But that's what makes it worse." They sat in silence. Around them, joggers passed, and the breeze carried the scent of salt water and moss. "Finally," Malik added, "I used to work for your father's company." Her head turned sharply. "What?" "I was there for 8 years, till I spoke up about something that could have killed people. Then I wasn't there anymore." Face drained of color. "He never told me," she whispered. "I didn't think he would." The truth sat between them now, real and heavy. Sloane blinked slowly, the foundation of her world beginning to tremble. "What do you want me to do?" she asked. Malik thought for a long time. "Start by listening," he said. "Not just to me, to people who don't look like you. People you don't usually see." She nodded, and for the first time, she really meant it. For days after their meeting at the park, Sloane couldn't sleep. The sound of Malik's voice, calm, unsentimental, repeated in her head like a metronome. "I used to work for your father's company." The words came with no bitterness, no accusation. And yet they sliced through her like no headline ever had. She remembered how she used to visit her father's sites as a child, playing in dusty offices while men in hard hats passed by. Back then, she believed her father built the city. It never occurred to her that people like Malik held it up. She needed answers. And for once, Walter Whitmore couldn't give them Malik. Didn't expect to see her again. He had said what needed to be said, and that was enough. He was focusing on the job, learning new systems, mentoring younger workers, and finally feeling like he wasn't just passing time, but building something again. But when Travis Cole showed up at Palmetto's gate, things took a turn. The vlogger, now with a growing following and sponsors reaching out, had come armed with a camera, a mic, and a story pitch. "I want to do a full piece," Travis said. "Not just a clip. Your life, your journey. From the tire to the truth. People want to hear from you, man." Malik didn't want to be a symbol. Symbols didn't bleed. They were used, celebrated, forgotten. Still, a part of him wondered, what if the truth could finally be told? Sloan took a risk. She drove to the downtown archive of Whitmore Properties, walked past the receptionist with a name badge she hadn't worn in years, and entered the personnel files room under the pretext of internal review. She wasn't even sure what she was looking for. But when she saw Malik's name on a termination report dated 9 years ago, her hand trembled. The file was thin. One page, dismissed due to performance concerns and repeated insubordination. But something felt off. Too vague. To clean, she called the former site manager listed on the report, a man named Alan Kersey, and asked for a meeting. "What's this about?" he asked cautiously. "I just want to understand what happened to Malik Johnson." There was a pause. Then, "Miss Whitmore, if I tell you what I remember, I want it off the record." Alan met her at a diner outside Mount Pleasant. He looked older than she remembered, with hands that shook when he lifted his coffee cup. Malik was solid. "One of the best we had," he began. "Quiet, didn't mess around. Knew his crew, kept M safe. So why was he fired? Because he saw something he shouldn't have. And he reported it to the wrong people." Sloan leaned in. There was a building, the Franklin Lofts. The waterproofing was wrong. Malik flagged it. Twice. Then he went over our heads. Corporate didn't like that. Neither did your father. Her stomach turned. "We were supposed to delay construction until repairs were made. But delays cost money. Next thing I know, Malik's gone," they said. "He was difficult." That's how it always goes, right? Sloan stared at him, numb, and the building. He looked away. It was sold, then flipped. Someone made a killing. Water damage showed up later, but by then, it was someone else's problem. Travis Cole, in the meantime, was uncovering his own trail. After Malik agreed reluctantly to let him dig, Travis reached out to old contacts. He found a retired accountant who had handled invoices for the Franklin Lofts project. "Funny you should ask," the man said over the phone. "There were rumors about falsified materials reports, something about cutting corners. I never saw the documents, but I heard chatter. Malik was the one who tried to stop it, right?" Travis felt the tension snap into place. This was the story. Not just a man helping a woman on the road. This was about corporate cover-ups, ethical sabotage, and one man who lost everything for doing the right thing. But telling it wouldn't be easy. Because if the truth came out, it wouldn't just ruin Walter Whitmore. It could destroy Sloan too. When Travis reached out to Sloan for comment, her first instinct was to hang up, but he didn't attack her. He just asked, "Do you want to know the full story? Or are you scared of what it might say about your family?" She met him later that night in the quiet corner of a bookstore cafe, away from cameras. He handed her a USB stick with copies of emails, reports secondhand. Statements enough to build a case. Enough to break a legacy. "What are you going to do with it?" she asked, voice brittle. "What are you going to do with it?" He replied, "At home." She plugged in the USB. The screen lit up with words, numbers, dates. Her father's signature. At the bottom of a memo denying responsibility for a roofing collapse. Internal emails discussing how to minimize exposure by letting go of a problematic foreman. That was Malik. Her father called him a problem. She sat in silence for nearly an hour. The next day, she showed up at Palmetto, unannounced. Malik was underneath a hybrid bus, sleeves rolled, grease up to his elbows. She waited. When he finally emerged, blinking in the sunlight, she stepped forward. "I know what happened," she said. He didn't flinch. "I figured you would, eventually. I read everything. The building, the memo, the cover-up." He wiped his hands on a rag, watching her closely. "I'm so sorry, Malik. Not just for the road, but for what my family did to you. For what I represented without even knowing it." He looked at her, not angry, just tired. "Knowing isn't enough," he said. She nodded. "I want to make it right, if you'll let me." The press conference was Walter Whitmore's idea, a calculated move polished down to the punctuation on the cue cards. The goal: contain the damage, spin the story, re-establish dominance. He would step in front of the cameras, acknowledge the unfortunate lapse in company oversight, and offer a donation to an urban development charity. Sloan would stand beside him, poised and silent, a show of family unity. But Sloan had her own plan. She arrived late, on purpose. When she walked into the crowded conference room, cameras ready, reporters murmuring, Walter gripping the edges of the podium like it was the only thing keeping him upright. Her heels echoed like thunder. She didn't go to the podium, she went to the crowd. Straight to where Malik stood, dressed in his work boots and a clean, pressed shirt. Hands in his pockets. The room fell into a hush. Sloan turned, lifted the mic from the podium, and spoke. Not with a practiced smile. Not with peer-sanitized sympathy. Just a steady voice, quiet at first, but firm. "I came here today because I was supposed to help my father tell a story. But it's not my father's story anymore. It's Malik's, and it always has been." Gasps rippled through the room. Walter's face paled, but Sloan didn't look at him. She looked at Malik. "You worked for our company for 8 years. You were loyal, principled, and when you saw something wrong, you tried to fix it, and we punished you for that." She turned back to the cameras. "This isn't just about a tire on the side of the road. This is about how easy it is to ignore the people who hold us up, to erase them when they become inconvenient." Her voice shook, but she didn't stop. "My father didn't want this truth out. But I do, because you deserve better. And because I'm not afraid to say this, Malik Johnson was right." The moment fractured everything. Walter's composure crumbled. He stepped forward, tried to reclaim the mic, but the damage was done. Reporters shouted questions, camera flashes exploded. And Malik still, quiet Malik, stood like a mountain in the middle of a storm. For the first time in years, the story belonged to him. Later that night, social media flooded with clips of Sloan's speech. The hashtag shifted. Hashtag Whitmore whistleblower trended.
Yes.
But so did hashtag real leadership and hashtag listen first. What no one expected was what happened next. Palmetto Transit held a press event of their own. But it wasn't about damage control. It was an announcement, Derek. Matthew stepped up to the podium, grinning like a man who'd finally won a long game. "We're expanding," he said. "Thanks to some generous, anonymous investments. We'll be opening to new training centers in Charleston, focused on ethical construction and mechanical engineering for underserved communities. And our director of training will be someone who knows the cost of doing the right thing." He turned to Malik. "Come on up here." Malik hesitated for once, visibly unsure. But when he stepped up and looked out at the crowd, he didn't see pity. He saw pride. That night, back at home, Malik sat on the porch with his daughter. Allah, the stars hung low over the trees. She leaned against him, small fingers curled around his arm. "Daddy." "Yeah, baby. Are you famous now?" He chuckled. "Kinda, but just for fixing a tire." She shook her head. "Not just that." There was something in her voice, a certainty that didn't come from viral videos or speeches. It came from watching him quietly all her life, getting up early, carrying more than he ever said, standing up even when no one clapped. He looked down at her. "You proud of me?" She nodded once. Always was. The twist didn't come from Walter Whitmore being punished. Not really. He wasn't indicted. Not yet. There were investigations underway, subpoenas circling, and shareholders in quiet revolt. But Walter didn't suffer a dramatic fall. Instead, he faced something worse. Irrelevance. His empire began to dissolve slowly, then faster. Clients withdrew, partners vanished, investors demanded leadership changes, and he, the man who once controlled the skyline, was left with silence. But the real twist came from Sloan. She didn't take over the company. She walked away from it. She joined Palmetto's board of community advisors, donated her inheritance share to fund scholarships for women in STEM from low-income families. Not out of guilt, but because she finally understood what she could do with power when it wasn't about protecting herself. Malik never asked for any of this. Not the attention, not the job, not the fame. But in the quiet weeks that followed, he found something rarer than vindication. He found peace. Not because the world had suddenly changed, it hadn't, but because he had planted something real, a path for others. He stood in the first classroom of the new technical center, months later, looking out at a row of young men and women, Black, Latino, white, first-generation college kids holding tools for the first time. "You don't have to be loud to make noise," he told them. "Sometimes you just gotta stand." It started, as so many things in America do, with a tire and a camera, but it ended somewhere deeper, in the slow rebuilding of trust, in the quiet reframing of what dignity looks like, in the recognition that change doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Months passed, the story faded from the front page, replaced by newer scandals, louder dramas, shorter attention spans. But Malik Johnson's name didn't disappear. Not because of algorithms or interviews, but because of something more enduring: impact. At Palmetto Transit's new training center, the walls were still half bare, still smelled of paint and concrete dust, but the seats were filled. Young people. From North Charleston, Goose Creek, and the outskirts of the city, some fresh out of high school. Others laid off from factory jobs, came here with calloused hands and cautious hope. And Malik was there to greet them. Not with celebrity, not with ego, but with presence. He remembered every name, listened more than he spoke. And when they asked why he did it, helped her, spoke up, kept going, he gave the same answer every time, because doing nothing never helped anyone. Sloan visited the center once. A week, not for press, not for praise. She brought water bottles, helped set up chairs, and sat quietly in the back during orientation sessions. Some students recognized her. Some didn't. Either way, she was fine with it. She had stepped away from the Whitmore name, publicly, legally. In one of the final acts of her media fallout, she released a personal letter titled "Unlearning the Family Business." It wasn't a tell-all. There were no salacious details, no dramatic betrayals. Just a simple truth. She had grown up surrounded by success, but never taught what it meant to earn respect. "My father built towers," she wrote, "but Malik Johnson taught me how to stand." The letter went viral, but Sloan didn't follow up. She let the silence that came after speak for itself. Walter Whitmore never apologized. He issued a carefully worded statement of regret for failures in oversight, then disappeared into a semi-retirement that looked more like exile. The Whitmore name still existed, but it had lost its luster. The properties remained, but the man who built them now lived alone, ignored by the very elite he once curated. One afternoon, an envelope arrived at his gated estate. No return address. Inside, a photograph. It was Malik, standing in front of the technical center, surrounded by a group of young apprentices, all laughing, all holding tools. On the back, a single line handwritten in black ink. "We're building something better." Walter never spoke of it, but he kept the photo in his desk drawer. Travis Cole, the vlogger who first posted the video, found his platform evolving too. His audience grew, but so did his responsibility. He began producing a docuseries about overlooked heroes in the South. Bus drivers, teachers, janitors, cafeteria workers. He titled the series Seen. In the final episode of the first season, he returned to where it all began, the gas station on Highway 17. The spot where Malik had knelt beneath a Mercedes without expecting a thing in return. The camera lingered on the road. The traffic still buzzed by. The sun still burned hot, but everything was different because someone had seen and Allah Malik's daughter blossomed. She grew bolder at school, standing up when teachers made assumptions, asking better questions. She started a mentorship club for girls in tech, inviting her dad to speak once a semester. He always wore the same work boots. Years later, during the opening ceremony of the second Palmetto Training Center, the mayor of Charleston asked Malik if he had any final words for the young crowd gathered under a temporary stage. His eyes full of ambition and uncertainty. He thought for a moment, then said, "Don't wait for people to do the right thing. Be the reason they remember how." The applause was long and loud, but it wasn't the sound that stayed with him. It was the stillness that came after. That rare kind of silence, full, sacred, when people truly listen. Because at the end of it all, this wasn't a story about a tire or a video or even a scandal. It was a story about recognition of value where others saw none, of truth long buried but never erased, of people who rise not because they're given a platform, but because they are the foundation. And long after the cameras stopped rolling, after the hashtags faded, after the outrage cooled, the lesson remained. Decency is not a spectacle, it's a choice. And sometimes the smallest moments reveal the strongest people.